Today, we turn our attention to a theme that brings these threads together in a deeply yet local way, and which is also widely relevant, which is Foraging Stories, Women, Wild Greens, and Urban Food Commons. We'll journey into Bangalore's lesser seen landscapes through the wild edible plants that thrive in the city's margins and the women whose knowledge and labor sustains them. So, for many urban consumers, food is often experienced as a packaged or curated product, often disconnected from the ecosystems and communities that make it possible. Learning about urban foraging and wild greens challenges this kind of a distance. It helps us also to recognize biodiversity within cities, value the traditional knowledge, and also help us reflect on how our choices shape local ecologies, nutrition, and livelihoods, and especially also value the women whose work often remains invisible in such kind of work. So for this, we are delighted to be joined by Seema Mundoli, faculty at Azim Premji University. Seema is a researcher, author, and educator whose work highlights the vital connections between people and nature in cities. Through her research, teaching, and writings, she also brings visibility to urban ecologies and the everyday relationships that shape equitable and sustainable futures. So please join me in welcoming Seema as we begin today's session.
Thank you, Chaitali. Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone else at Foodwize too, Priya, Srijana, for inviting me for this. Like you said, it's a great pleasure to be here always to talk about our work, but more importantly, placing it in the context of Bangalore and ideas of sustainability and food justice. The title for today's talk, as those who, as per the invite that was shared, and I'm going to talk about is Foraging Stories, Women, Wild Greens, and Food Commons. And I'm moving my cursor, so Chaitali, just tell me if it moves, okay? Yeah, it's working?
Yeah, it moved, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I also want to start by saying that this is not entirely my work. I'm not the only person who has done this. There is a very large group of us at the university. Some of them are still with us. Some of them have gone to study further or are working elsewhere. And it is most importantly knowledge that the women have shared with us. So this is not our knowledge. We are only just the messengers about the knowledge. This is entirely, and we are always very grateful to the women who have so kindly and patiently shared it. For us, it is research, but for them, it is a way of life. And so what I'm going to talk about today is urban foraging, or around the book that we brought out called Chasing Sopu, which is a book in which we have recorded around 56 species of greens that are foraged by women in Bangalore. And broadly, what I'll talk about today and around our work is what is foraging, where is it done, who does it, is there a certain group of people who do it, why do people do it, and also in addition to the species that are foraged, the kind of species, what are the challenges that are faced by foragers today? So for me, my introduction to, I grew up in a university campus. I used to go to my ancestral house in Kerala for my summer vacations, but these were all very green and not the typical today's metropolitan urban areas. And I have seen my grandmother walking along the river and, plucking something, or in being in our house, in our extended house, plucking something from there. But my introduction to foraging as in the city, actually, the idea of, and that was always there in the back of my mind, but it was never really something that I thought about much till I started working in the urban ecology context in 2013 and 2014. Around 2013 is when I started working in Bangalore, around the lakes of Bangalore. And that time, our research was looking at what are the impacts of urbanization on lakes, who are the people who are still using the lakes in Bangalore. And during one of my visits to my field sites, one of which was located near the IT complex in ITPL, and another on the new airport road that has come, the Bangalore, the arterial road for the airport. I happened to see one day, I'd finished my interviews and I was sitting with a colleague of mine, and I happened to see this lady in blue. She's a grazer, and I had interviewed her already about how she comes to the lake, how often she comes to the lake, how the lake has changed over some time. Then I suddenly saw her bend and start scraping something from the floor of the lake. So I walked over to her and I asked her what she is doing. And she said that she is collecting these sopu. So if you see, she's using a shell which she had found at the bottom of the lake, a clam, a shell of a clam that she had found at the bottom of the lake. And she had started scraping these greens. So I was a bit surprised because we've been there for more than 2 weeks. We've been walking on the lake bed and never seen anything like this. So she said that these are what they locally called as onagane sopu. And she was going to take them home, clean them, and put it in her saru, make a sopu saru and add a little bit of it to the sambar. And I also took some with me. I spent a lot of time trying to clean it at home. And finally put it in the sambar. It takes a lot of time to clean. And these sopu are supposed to be very good for the eyes. They're very nutritious. So her response to me when I asked her, why are you taking all this trouble of scraping something from the bottom of the lake, was to say that, if I go to the market, I'll have to spend 15 rupees and buy some palak or some other kind of sopu. But this is free for me, right? I can just pick it up, take it home. I don't have to pay anything for it. And then I'm able to cook a very nutritious meal for the family. So this was my first introduction. And later I saw other women in the same lake as well as many other lakes doing this. That is when my interest also in this urban foraging, that it happens in a place like Bangalore, it first struck me. And so since then, it has always been there, both in my mind and in the group of all of us in the university, about what is this foraging, and we need to look more detail into it. So many of you all would know what it is. Foraging is something that involves a collection of not just edible foods, but also non-edible products. And it's done in different kinds of landscape, from forests and rural areas. Of course, we are very familiar, but also in urban and peri-urban areas. Like, for example, where I am located right now is near our campus in Sarjapura in Bangalore. And I often see there's an empty plot of land. I see women forage some greens. They're picking up some greens from there. And it's a plot of land in between different buildings that are coming up. And whatever they forage is used. Foraging is not just also for house consumption. Sometimes we see people sell the forage food, forage greens, and they're obviously of different kinds, which are used in food, medicine, fuel, and we'll look at a few of these. And it's also been a very traditional practice in most communities. Like I said, my grandmother did it. My mother didn't. I've never seen my mother do it, but I've seen my grandmother forage. So it's been an age-old practice which is slowly losing, and we'll go into some of the reasons why in the urban context this is disappearing. But there are also many interested groups. So this little news article on the right, bottom right, which I've shown, is actually something that has appeared in Vogue. And it's talking about how urban foraging is demonstrating the benefits of sourcing our own food. This is something that as urban residents, we would never even kind of think about. So it happens in different contexts. It is done for different kinds of purposes. It is done for household use as well as for sale. So where is foraging usually done? So our idea of what nature is, whenever we think of nature, whenever we ask our students, what is nature, they always give responses about some distant forest or a mountain landscape, some grassland which they have visited. But if we try to talk to them about when we really want to talk about, is there nature in cities, and what is this kind of nature that is there in the cities, then, and what kind of foraging is done in these natural spaces that are cities. And we have used the lens of what we call as urban commons to look at these urban natural spaces. So urban commons are, many of you all would have heard about rural commons. These are lands that are community owned, community managed. People take care of them. They extract resources from it. They're like grazing lands, or there may be some groves from which some kind of produce is extracted by the local communities. In the context of cities, urban commons are, of course, state-owned. They are some kind of a revenue land, but they are also used by both the local communities and migrant communities, both from a lower, higher social, with a certain amount of socioeconomic disadvantage. But they are also not like, since they are owned by the government, they are not only cared by the government, they are also cared for by communities. Sometimes trusts like you have the lake trusts in Bangalore. They take care of the lakes as commons. And these commons in cities are providing a number of what we use the term as ecosystem services for the urban residents. So from provisioning services like food, medicine, some kind of raw material, seeds for oil, etc., to other things like which may be of cultural and religious significance, or also these commons provide different ecological functions, like the wetlands of a lake provide they provide regulating and flood mitigation. And there are also many other unconventional spaces. So in all these urban commons, there is different kinds of urban commons. There is some kind of urban foraging that is done. So the more common places we think of as urban commons are, of course, lakes. These are both pictures of lakes in Bangalore. In fact, it is the same lake, one in winter and one in the summer when it becomes dry. This is Kannuru Lake. It's near Bangalore, and this is where I first came across the idea of, I saw women foraging. So you have urban commons where foraging happens. One is the lakes or the keres as they are known here. Then there are these smaller ponds. These are not the kalyanis that are found in temples, but they are smaller ponds which are found in, and many of these are now being converted to other kinds of use. You don't really see as many ponds, but as you can see in this picture in one of the peri-urban villages we took, sites we took, there's a lot of greenery around. So these are also sites for urban foraging. The other very important site, but which is fast disappearing, are what are locally known as gunduthops. So traditionally, gunduthops were wooded growths where certain species of trees like mango, jamun, fig species, the mahua species, they were all planted by the villagers for use for the local community. So if you look back maybe about 100 years, every village would have a top, a lake, a grazing land, a kalyani. There were this set of commons that every village had. And these tops were used for, have many different kinds of uses as well. The wood from these was used for any kind of development, community work, like maybe construction or renovation work in a temple. If somebody was building a house and they did not have access to wood, they could put in a request with the Shanbog, the Gauda, and the Patel to give some wood. So this particular top that you see is also has a lot of, it's one of the tops that had 54 trees of jamun, old jamun and mango. And they were, we've often seen women also foraging in this Gunditop. So there are many of these tops in the peri-urban part of Bangalore. There are also cemeteries. Cemeteries were another urban common. Again, cemeteries are used for grazing. Women collect firewood from there. And occasionally, sometimes you have some kinds of foraging material that is found there. But actually, women generally will be a little hesitant about foraging from a cemetery because of the connotation of the place. It's a burial ground after all. There are also these grazing land, remnant grazing lands. Then you have urban trees, which are avenue trees, which are growing along the roads in Bangalore. Bangalore has such a high amount of greenery, and you get these, there's a lot of foraging that happens around urban trees. There are also urban commons like the kattes and parks are another important site. And I think we no longer surprised when we hear that Lal Bagh, Kaban Park and all are very, very important foraging sites for women in Bangalore. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, there had been a walk that was done early morning in Lal Bagh by Shruti Tarayal from Wild Greens. I could not go because I fell sick, but she had actually taken a group around in Lal Bagh to show them the different kinds of greens. And I was still a part of the WhatsApp group, and I saw a whole lot of greens that they had collected, and they later also were sharing on the WhatsApp group. So parks such as Kaban Park, Lal Bagh, even the smaller neighborhood parks, they are all also sites of foraging. Then the unconventional urban spaces. So these are things like, along pavements. You'll see in remnant small places in slums. So if you see the picture on the top right, this is a slum dwelling in Krishna, in Kyarpuram, in somewhere on Kyarpuram Road, and Battarhalli area. And the lady is growing a set of greens here, but there are also some wild ones that have come up, which she said she forages quite often for her household use, including things like aloe vera and empty plots of land along railway tracks, bus stands. These are all the unconventional places we don't really think of sites that could be for foraging. So I remember during COVID, I had signed up for an urban foraging course. And so they would send us one species of plant to look for in a place very close to your house. And I found a lot of those species in a 1 meter area of a plot of patch of land very close to my house. And then some of the species I had found actually on the divider on the main road near my house. So we'd be surprised at how in the smallest of places too, there is a lot of these urban foraging that can happen. So who are the people who forage in the city? So traditionally, if you look at literature, the scholarly literature and academic literature, there are there's a lot of research that is done on communities, migrant communities from indigenous cultures that have moved into the city, and they continue this process of foraging in woodlands or areas around them. But then more recently, the even urban foragers who have had no background or who don't come from any such community that forages or have any roots to any foraging have also been taken up. I'm one of them, of course. There is also Sarjapura Curries near a place. Suresh, who started Sarjapura Curries, has been also working with women in Sarjapura who traditionally used to, their parents and grandparents used to collect forage for different greens in the area, but they have kind of stopped it because foraging was also not was sometimes seen as, when you can go and buy in the market, you don't want to forage. It is seen as something that is not very cool to do. So, even by traditional village families that would do it. But he has restarted this whole idea of foraging among working with women from the community. And he also has a farm near a university, and he also takes courses. So these are also the newer urban folk who are getting interested in the idea of foraging. So our study, while we in our study on different kinds of urban commons, we have come in contact with foraging at different places. But the systematic study, one systematic study that was done is this patterns of urban foraging in Bangalore. And in this, we interviewed about 202 interviewees. And of them, 16% of them had said that they foraged. So if you look at the 4 sites that were chosen for the foraging, there was Alsur, which is like the proper urban center of the city. There was Siddhapura, a little more urban, but not as much as Alsur, Banshankari, and then Talagattapura. So Talagattapura was more towards the peri-urban part of Bangalore. So these 4 are on a gradient of the urban to peri-urban, and we looked at the people who are foraging here. And what we found was one interesting aspect was the majority who did foraging were women. And this is not true of only this study. Whenever we have spoken to any families during a part of our other research also, many of them have often told us it's the women who forage, because there'll be someone who is walking back from domestic work from somewhere. She's got her dinner of the family in her head, in her mind. She has to make dinner. She's thinking what to make. So whatever when she's walking, she's able to forget something, she immediately picks it up. And I think once we know this happens and we keep an eye out for it, we will actually see a lot of women doing this. I never used to pay attention to it, but after I got interested in foraging, I'm always curious now about women who are walking on the road, especially, and there is a socioeconomic context to it. It's actually women, a lot of women, the people who forage on a daily basis are women from lower economic backgrounds and households, because they are the ones who are trying to meet their daily needs of food at almost on a survival basis. So whatever they can forage, they take. They also, in terms of historically disadvantaged communities like SCs and OBCs, are also communities who forage a lot. So this is something that we have found both in the research that we have done and also in our other, in this particular research paper, as well as in other research that we have been doing. So in this study, we found that there were 76 species that were foraged. And we included, so there's a guide which we have brought out called Chasing Sopo, which has 55 species. And we have included these in those, several of these species in that guide. And there are also certain periods when does foraging happen the most. So some of them said it happens from June to September during the monsoon. Others said it was post-monsoon, while others did foraging throughout the year. So when the lady I spoke to the first time I spoke to, hers is more of like a incidental foraging. She came for grazing. While her cows are grazing, she happened to see the suppu, and she started, she collected the greens. But what she also said is that she was aware that it was during this season that this particular suppu would be there. So she's actually keeping an eye out. So that was during the summer season, and she was able to get the suppu at that point of time. And we also collected these little snippets about why they forage, right? So they forage, of course, for food, but it's not just for food. They also forage for medicinal use. They also forage for cultural practices. So even something like eucalyptus, which is actually an exotic species, we've heard women say that they actually pluck the leaves of the eucalyptus and add it to hot water, boiling water, for some kind of a purification to make them feel better while having a bath. There are also parts of plants that they use as ritual offerings, as floral offerings. And also, this is the food and mainly for cultural and food and medicine uses. But it's interesting that once you begin to notice the many different reasons why women forage. So these two are pictures that I had taken. The one on the left with the lady looking under the car is from Malleshwaram. And I had seen this lady many days when I was walking past. I would see her, collecting something from under this car. And I asked her once, one day I stopped and asked, she was very hesitant to answer. And she said that she works as a domestic help in one of the houses. And every day after she leaves her work, she collects these seeds of the Bahunia, the Basavanpada tree. So the seeds of that are something that she collects, and she sells it to the forest department nursery or the BBMP nursery also. So she gets about 10 to 20 rupees per kilo of these seeds. So clearly, we may think that this is, why would she expend so much energy and time in collecting it? But clearly those 20 rupees are very, very important for her. This kind of foraging is very, very critical for her household income. The other picture was taken in Karmalaram railway station. So I used to take the train from Karmalaram to Yashwantpura. And one day I saw this lady, and when I went up and spoke to her, she was a really old lady, and she said that her daughter works in as a domestic help in some of the apartment complexes near the station. So near the station, if you go a little ahead, there is this whole row of pongamia trees that have been planted. So during the season, this lady comes with her daughter. She collects the pot. So what she's doing there is she's actually separating the seed from the pot. She collects the seeds, the pods. She comes and sits in the platform. While waiting for her daughter to finish work, she's getting out the seeds. And then they dry this and extract oil, which they use for burning lamps. So I asked her, do you sell it? She said, no, I don't sell it. I use it for lighting the lamp in the house. They have the deity's lamp, so she uses it for that. So it's doing two things. I mean, she says, I can't do much work on my own, but whenever I come here, when my daughter comes, I come here, I collect it while she's working, and I do this work. Similarly, castor seeds along the banks of lake beds. Castor seeds you can see growing wild everywhere. One of the ladies we met on the banks of the Puttanhalli Lake, she collects these seeds, she dries them, again extracts oil, and they use it for applying for medicinal purposes, because it is said to have help with body pain. So these are all things we would wonder why people spend so much time and energy doing this, but they are obviously it is of great value to them as individually and for their household. So if you look at what kind of spaces the foraging has been done, a lot of it happens in unused land. So if you look at a city, not so much in the center of Bangalore anymore, but as you move away from the core and mostly in the peri-urban part of Bangalore, you have these chunks of apartment blocks and then empty plots of land. Empty plots of land. So it's like a mosaic of these. So a lot of foraging happens in those plots of land in between constructions that have already happened. Then some amount of it happens in parks. Like we mentioned, Lalbagh and Kaban Park actually have a lot of foraging happening, and much of it is also done by the women who work there. So they are people who go to the park to work. They're gardeners, and as they are working there, they also collect whatever sopo that they can find. And it's very, very difficult because if anyone here has tried foraging, it's not such a easy thing to do because two species looks the same. I remember during the online course, I would collect the species thinking I was 100% sure this was the one, share a picture, and then the person would say, no, please don't have this. It's extremely poisonous. And it looked exactly like the species that we had been asked to collect. So this requires an enormous amount of skill and knowledge that is traveled. It's not something that you can just learn in 1 day or 2 days. So these women have acquired these skills and they're now using it while doing their jobs. Then gardens also have places like farmlands, village areas in the peri-urban area. These are all places where a lot of foraging happens. If you look at the graph on the right side, where we're talking about where the foraging happens. So if you remember, we had said we had done the study in 4 sites, from center of Bangalore, Alsur, to Talagattapura, which is in the peri-urban. So it's not surprising that a majority of the foraging is happening in Talagattapura, which is in the peri-urban part of Bangalore, and not so much in Alsur. So it's also, and we'll talk about this a little later, about why this is an indication of the urbanization and how things are, changing for cities. So if we look at barriers to foraging, so foraging seems to have been a practice that many of these women and many of the communities that we spoke to, especially from a disadvantaged socioeconomic category that we spoke to, said they did. But it's also, foraging is also a practice that is slowly fading. Because one, especially among the younger generation, and this is one of the people we spoke to as part of the study, and he said that he didn't have any, I didn't even know that these species were foraged. He other than kottamalli and menthia, which are bought in the market, this generation doesn't even know that there are these, like me, I didn't know that there were species that were being foraged till I happened to run into the woman who was foraging in the lake. So similarly, he also is not aware of it. So that transfer of knowledge that used to happen before between different generations has also reduced a lot. Second is about the health concerns. So women said that for one, in cities, there are not many open and clean spaces to collect. A lot of times, the sopu that you see that they want to forage grows on the edge of canals or ditches, or even in lakes. The area may have been used for open defecation. So while the sopu is growing there, they are very hesitant, and rightfully so, to collect it because it's not very clean. And even when it's growing next to the ditches in the city, they're like, we are not very sure about the water. But it's ironic because the sopu that we buy from the market, we really don't know where that is being grown either. I remember in one of our field visits around Vartur Lake, had gone and they were growing these, paddy was being grown, of course. There were a lot of flower cultivation and a lot of palak. And it was being grown in the sewage water of Vartur Lake. So I was very surprised. And the person whose field it was said that, don't look so surprised. This is what is going to KR market, and from there to your vegetable shops, and then coming to our dinner plate. But there we are not seeing, we are not aware of it. It's out of sight, out of mind till somebody really shows it to you. Here in this case, the women know that they can see the sopo, they can see the ditch where it is being grown. So they have major health concerns about how they can collect this sopo. The other thing that is happening, of course, in a city like Bangalore, and if you see this picture just between 2000 and 2007 and much later, more recently, it would have, you can see that the brown part of the city has exploded. And that is all built area. What were once green open spaces or water bodies are now all being converted into built spaces. So there is a lack of access. There's literally no space for collecting these greens anymore. But why is this happening? One is, if you look at the kind of urban commons like lakes now, earlier lakes would spread out. There would be a lot more space in the wetland area. But now most of the buildings come really close, within 30 meters of the lake boundary. So the amount of land that the lake used to have earlier is much lesser now than it was before. So there's a lot of land that is being converted. Many of the lakes have also been converted to other kinds of land use. For example, bus stops or stadiums, Akitimanhalli Lake, Majestic, Sampangi Lake, which has become Kantirva Stadium. A lot of the Gaumalas, where people used to do collection of foraging for sopu, have become our ITPL, our parklands, and there the aesthetic is very different. It is not about having plants growing wild. It's about having plants that have only ornamental value, that are grown in a very landscaped kind of a way. There are all the topes that we spoke about, the Gundu topes. They have been one of the lands that have been converted into schools, community spaces, housing for the poor, veterinary hospitals, etc. So we had done the study on some 346 commons in 40 villages in Bangalore East. And we looked at some 96 Gundu topes, of which only 3 were left. And only 1 or 2 were in a very good condition. The rest of it was either converted, and some 5 or 6 were in a very degraded position. So there's a lot of loss of these urban commons that has happened, especially in the last 10-15 years, as the city of Bangalore has grown, which means that open spaces that used to be a part of, that were important for foraging, are no longer available. There's also this, and this is not an easy choice. I mean, if you ask the community at a particular point of time, do they want the common land or do they want the common land to be converted to a school? It's a very tough choice for them. If they don't have a high school, they prefer that the common land is converted to a high school. So these are usually very difficult choices in urbanization, but the end result is that the common lands that could be foraging sites are no longer accessible and available for foraging. So this is a typical example of one of the topes. We have been looking at this from 2013 till 2020 when COVID happened. And this is the same one that I mentioned, which had 54 huge trees of jamun, which was used extensively for grazing, for also for fuel wood collection by women. There were a lot of local festivities that used to happen in this top. But over the years, we've seen this tope itself change in character. First, a small building, which was a veterinary hospital, was set up. Then a couple of trees fell. So the local boys set up a badminton, a net for playing throwball or volleyball. Then the next thing that happened is that there was a proposal to give away this tope for housing for the poor. So the local community got together and said, no, we can't have that. And what they did was ask for it to be converted to a park. But if you see the picture on the bottom right corner, you'll see how the character of the tope has changed. It's no longer this wild growing grove as was in 2013, but by 2020, just before COVID, it had become this very landscaped, manicured park. And we've actually written about this as a story for children called Where Have All Our Gundutopes Gone? And in this kind of a landscaped park with a lawn, with these very ornamental species, often exotic species of plants, it's very, very difficult for any kind of food plant that was foraged earlier to be grown. And the very aesthetic of it changed, the very priority changes to something very aesthetic. Even people begin to say that, we don't want our Gundutop to look like earlier where it was very a chaotic green. We want it to be this nice manicured park where we can go walking. But why that is happening is because the new generation does not really have the knowledge about foraging. If they had the knowledge about foraging and they had used the spaces for foraging, then maybe they would not want it to be converted to something like this. So this is one of the reasons. The other is there's also one of the elements that is happening with urban commons in Bangalore, which is used for foraging a lot, is that they are being made spaces that are fenced and excluded. So once you make a park, you have a fencing, you have a boundary wall, then you put a gate. And the next thing that happened was timings for parks. You can only access it between 7 to 9 in the morning and between 4 and whatever time in the evening. And a whole lot of restrictions like don't pluck flowers, don't pluck leaves, don't do this, don't do that. If you go to Kavan Park, the guard is always following you around, telling you not to do things, right? So all this has brought a sense of exclusion. So when and it's also something not just the gates and the boundary wall is a physical exclusion. But if you talk to communities that traditionally foraged in these places, they say that yes, we know their foraging species may still be there, but with these walls and these gates, we don't feel that we can go and collect it anymore. So it's also become a mental kind of a block that they can't access these spaces anymore. There are also other barriers that are there to foraging. Some of the people we spoke to said that they're not interested because it's no longer, it's seen as something that, what do you say? It's like people who used to eat ragi and now prefer rice. It's seen as a status symbol. To forage is seen as an act of poverty, but so they stop foraging because they can also now buy whatever they want from the market. So they are not interested in the idea of foraging. They say that we have no time to collect. Some of the women said we go in the morning, we work in 10 houses, and then we come back home. We really have no time to buy. We just buy whatever we can from the marketplace. Or rarely they're walking by and they see something, they pluck it, but they prefer to buy it from the marketplace. They also have had some experiences with bad experiences. For example, species that they foraged before, they tried to forage now and they said it tasted bitter. It didn't taste like the plants that I am aware of, I used to have. So that becomes like a negative block to them. There are also sort of beliefs that have come up saying that, we buy the green vegetables that we buy are better because if you forage, then they're really not good for health. It aggravates certain things. These are things that women told us. We don't really know how they got these ideas, but it's kind of spread by a word among them. So all this has contributed to the idea that we don't want to forage we don't want to forage anymore. But if we look at urban foraging and what it is today, it is clearly a very important activity for many women. They still do it. If they are still doing it, it means it is important for them in spite of the many different kinds of chores and jobs that they may have in the cities that they live in. And several of the women, we have included these snippets in the book Chasing Sopu. For many women, foraging has been critical for their food security and for their survival. So as this lady says, Padmavati, she says her father had lost her job and they could barely afford any money to buy rice. And so the mother had to go back to her traditional knowledge about wild foods and greens that she used to forage. And so she used to collect those. And that's how this lady developed a taste for these foraged foods. So it's something that is clearly very critical. It has proven to be very important for people at times of food security. And we hear this quite often. If you go to slums in Bangalore, one thing you'll notice is a lot of drumstick trees. And so when we've spoken to women, we've asked them, why do you, our first idea about slums is that there is no trees or plants there. Then we noticed there are more drumstick trees. So they said that, yeah, we use the drumstick leaves. Suppose a particular day we don't have any vegetables. We've had no money to buy vegetables. Then we just collect the leaves of the drumstick and we use it in our food. It's an extremely nutritious source. So they're able to give something for their family. And there are also very interesting ways of making children have greens. So one of the recipes that one of the ladies suggested to us was also how her grandchildren do not eat suppu. So she would mix it with egg, scrambled egg, one egg and lots of suppu. So that one egg, she would somehow convince them to eat a lot of greens, and she had to spend only on that one, actually on one egg. So it was different ways of doing it. The other thing is to we have to build, if you want the practice of foraging to continue, we have to also build it into our into the next generation. And this is very, very difficult because, even like I said, I found it very difficult to identify species. So how do you learn about these? Are not things that you can read in a book or look at a guide and go and do it. So you have to actually keep on foraging and engaging in it. And the best way is to hang out or tag along with people, older people who know it. So that this is actually going to be one of the biggest problems with foraging, that this loss of knowledge transfer. Nobody knows among the next generation what are the greens you can forage in Bangalore, because one, the city has changed so much. The older generation has stopped foraging, so the younger generation never learned from this. This is going to be a huge problem going forward for foraging. And these initiatives that are there with a few people starting is great, but we'll need a lot more than that for foraging. We also have to find ways to reintroduce these things in our diet. For example, that Onagane suppo, when I collected, I had no idea what to do with it. So I had to actually learn from her, how to clean it, how to use the leaves. So the only way to, even if we collect the greens, if we don't have a recipe for it, then we won't really know how to use it. And that's what we have also tried to do in the book Chasing Sopo. We have included a whole range of recipes, bassaro, sopsaro, vegetarian and non-vegetarian recipes that they can use. And also medicinal ways in which they can use the medicinal, the leaves can be used for medicinal purposes. So, and also it's about building a taste among children. Children don't like the taste of these greens anymore. How do you creatively make it for them? That's like the old grandmother said, I have to add it in egg if they have to eat any greens. So this is going to be, these are traditional greens which may not even be as tasty as a palak. And we also have to rethink the way we are designing our cities. The way we are designing it is having more and more built surfaces, more and more converted areas. Where is the space then for, in these urban visions, whether it is of smart cities or the public-private partnerships, these urban visions really have no space for foraging in it. Foraging is seen as a backward activity, not as something that can provide food, nutrition, and maybe even a sense of connection with nature that that many people are losing in cities. So even in the design of cities, how do we ensure that there is space for this, for foraging plants, wild foraging plants to grow? And our entire cities are not just about landscaped aesthetics and ornamental plants and built area. So this is something that we really have to this has to be thought of at a policy kind of a level. And one of the examples that we can look to is in Kerala. So Kerala has this urban employment guarantee scheme called the Ayangali Urban Employment Guarantee Scheme. And there, it's like the Manrega, the NREGA, but in the cities. And one of the things they do there is also that in these plots of land, it's not about foraging alone. In empty private plots of land, whether private or public, people are allowed to grow food, crops, vegetables, flowers also, which they use for local use. And this is then consumed by the people who are growing them, and they also sell it. right? So we have to design cities, and they are also looking at making more and more, investing more and more into greening cities in Kerala through this scheme. So how can we find a convergence between existing themes in cities that can also help promote these practices like urban foraging, not look at it that are backward, like it is a backward activity. How can we make our spaces more accessible, whether it is a park or a lake or any of these urban commons that we are talking about? So it will require a much larger thinking. So it requires urban to overcome the barriers of urban foraging. We will need to move away from uh, we we have to recognize individually and at a household level the kind of benefits that foraging provide, and also at a city level. How do you design cities for this foraging? We have to recognize that this is going to be a very important for food security for especially the urban poor. So that's probably it from me. I think it's about 50 minutes, so I should not speak more. And yes, like